Today's daf is daf Nun Aleph, and we're going to begin about 10 lines down from the top where we left off yesterday. And the first word in the line is me. And we're up to Amalei, Rav Huna, Bered Rab Yeshua of Rava. And in the Gemara that we had yesterday on daf Nun, Rabbi Meir said that the Pesach is called a carbon yachid. And as a result, it would generate an Isur Tmura. And Rabbi Yaakov said that Chagiga is a carbon tzibur. And the Gemara is going to try to find out why is it that Pesach is a carbon yachid and Chagiga is a carbon tzibur. Vitano, we learned in the Brisa, and the Brisa, as we saw earlier, quotes Rabbi Meir that the Pesach is a carbon yachid, and Rabbi Yaakov, who said that the Chagiga is a carbon tzibur. So Rav Huna asks Rava, Maishna Pesach to Karile carbon yachid, u Maishna Chagiga to Karile carbon tzibur. What's the logical basis for the two? Why are they different? What's the logical basis for the distinction between the two? Why is carbon Pesach different than the carbon Chagiga? After all, the carbon Pesach, you're calling it a carbon yachid, and the carbon Chagiga, carbon tzibur, both of them are brought by each individual. It's clearly a chovas yachid. It's not brought, it's not an obligation on the tzibur. There's not one carbon Pesach for the entire tzibur, nor one carbon Chagiga for the entire tzibur. Perhaps you're going to argue that the carbon Chagiga is classified as a carbon tzibur because of asi b'chnufya. In other words, it is a gathering, an assembly of all of Klal Yisrael, the Mikdash during the Regel, but Pesach nami asi b'knufya. That's not unique to Chagiga. That applies to carbon Pesach as well. You can describe carbon Pesach as a carbon that comes when, on the 14th of Nisan, everybody in Klal Yisrael comes to the Beis HaMikdash to bring their carbon Pesach. It's also got this element of knufya. So why is it that you're willing to classify Chagiga as a carbon tzibur because of knufya, and you're not willing to classify carbon Pesach as a carbon tzibur? Why not? So Rava responds now to Rav Huna, Bered Rab Yeshua, and he says the following with regard to carbon Pesach. That Rabbi Meir classified carbon Pesach as a carbon yachid. Ika Pesach Sheni, in Rabbi Meir's words, he was including not just Pesach Rishon, but Pesach Sheni, Dilo Asi B'chnufya. It's lacking the element of knufya because it's only individuals who, because of their tumah, they were not able to bring Pesach Rishon. Now they come to the Mikdash on the 14th of Iyar to be Makriv Pesach Sheni. And that's why Rabbi Meir calls Pesach a carbon yachid, not so much because of Pesach Rishon. Pesach Rishon has the element of knufya, would be classified as a carbon tzibur no less than Chagiga, but because included in the carbon Pesach is the carbon Pesach Sheni, which is certainly brought only by individuals, by yechidim, therefore it's classified, meaning Pesach itself, including both Rishon and Sheni, is classified as a carbon yachid. And we should add the following, that Pesach Rishon is Doche Shabbos and Tumah in the case of Rov Tzibur Tmeim. So we see that there is a difference between Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni. Pesach Rishon certainly has an element of tzibur to it, insofar as if the tzibur is tamei, then we'll bring the carbon Pesach in any event. We'll even eat the carbon Pesach. That's not true for Pesach Sheni. And Pesach Sheni is not Doche Shabbos. Pesach Rishon is Doche both Tumah and Shabbos. Amalei Rav Huna now responds back to Rava and hits him with a kasha. He says, in Cain, if you tell me carbon Pesach in the words of Rabbi Meir, includes Pesach Sheni, then Yehi Doches HaShabbos Vesatuma. You should come to an untenable conclusion that according to Rabbi Meir, that korban which he describes as korban Pesach, which is ba b'Shabbos, Docha Shabbos, and ba b'Tumah, that should apply even to Pesach Sheni. We don't know. We never heard that Pesach Sheni is Doches HaTumah. Pesach Sheni is an opportunity for someone who was tummy on the first round to bring the Pesach B'Tara a month down the line on Yudalad Iyar, but not B'Tumah. Amalei, so Rava says you know what? You're right. The conclusion is accurate. And according to Rabbi Meir, the halacha would be that Pesach Sheni is Doche, not only Shabbos, but also Tumah. Kiman Yomer Dochi. And this reflects the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda, the Sanya we learned in the Brisa. According to Tanakama Rabbi Yehuda, Pesach Sheni is only Doche Shabbos, but it's not Doche Tumah. Because the whole purpose of Pesach Sheni is to give an opportunity to a person who became tar between after Pesach Rishon, before Pesach Sheni, to bring the korban, but not Betumah. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Af Doches HaTumah, that Pesach Sheni is not only Doche Shabbos, it's also Doche Tumah. If we identify Rabbi Meir with the Shita Rabbi Yehuda, we derive the conclusion that when Rabbi Meir was talking about korban Pesach, classifying as a korban tzibur, when Rabbi Meir classified korban Pesach as a korban yachid, because he was referring to Pesach Sheni as well, which is certainly a korban yachid, there's no kinufya. Nevertheless, when Rabbi Meir established that a korban Pesach could be Doche Shabbos and Doche Tumah, he was referring to not only Pesach Rishon, but Pesach Sheni as well, because we identify Rabbi Meir with the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda. And Rabbi Yehuda maintains that Pesach Sheni is Doche not only Shabbos, but also Tumah. My time at the Tanakama, let's get into this machlokas about the nature of Pesach Sheni. Tanakama says that Pesach Sheni is not Doches HaTumah. And if you're asking me for a logical underlying reason for the Tanakama, it's simple. The Tanakama will tell you, Mipnei Tuma Dachisa, the reason why he could not bring Pesach Rishon, you pushed him away from Pesach Rishon, is because of Tuma. And now, Yaseh B'Tuma, he's going to bring Pesach Sheni B'Tuma, makes no sense. The whole purpose of Pesach Sheni, that whole enterprise, was created to avoid Tuma. And now you're going to tell me that Pesach Sheni is Doche Tuma, Rabbi Yehuda, but yet Rabbi Yehuda says, despite it all, that Pesach Sheni is Doche Tuma. What's his logic? Amalacha, he says, let's read the pasuk. Amakra, the pasuk says, with regard to Pesach Sheni, this is in Parshas Palosa that we read just a few days ago. It says, Kechol chukas ha-Pesach yasu oso, all the dinim that apply to Pesach Rishon apply to Pesach Sheni, which means afilu b'tumah. And that would mean that in a case where rov tzibur atmeim, then we will bring Pesach Rishon b'tumah. In the case of Pesach Sheni, we're not talking about rov tzibur, obviously we're talking about individuals, but nevertheless, they, through their mitzvah of korban Pesach, will override tumah. Afilu b'tumah. And the logic here is that HaTorah Zira Olav La Soso B'Tara, the Torah wanted to try to bend over backwards to give this person who was Tomei Pesach Rishon an opportunity to bring the Korban Pesach B'Tara Pesach Sheni. The Torah wanted to offer that as a possibility. But Lo Zacha, if he wasn't able to bring neither Pesach Rishon nor Pesach Sheni B'Tara, then Yasenu B'Tumah, he can bring the Pesach Sheni B'Tumah. And now we're going to begin Daf Nun Aleph Amid Beis. The Gemara now goes back to a suffix of Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Lazar, that we quoted earlier on Daf Nun. And that was about the par of Yom Kippurim. And the issue was whether we classify it as a carbon yachid, because after all, it's the Kohen Gadol who brings his par. And if it's his par, then it's oset tmura, because a carbon yachid is oset tmura. And if he, again, as we discussed yesterday, if he has a behemoth chulin, he could turn to, in this case, the partial Kohen Gadol b'Yom Kippur, and he could say zu tmura zu, and he can now attach to the carbon, to the behemoth chulin, the status of kedushas haguf of the partial Kohen Gadol. That's one side in Rabbi Lazar, and the reason why the mechanism of Tmura operates is because we classify the partial Kohen Gadol just as it's called. It's the power of the Kohen Gadol, and therefore it's a carbon yachid. Rabbi Lazar, on the other hand, had another side, because perhaps we could classify the partial Kohen Gadol as a carbon tzibur that doesn't make Tmura, or if not a carbon tzibur, at least call it a carbon ashutfim, as Rava said yesterday. And why is carbon the partial Kohen Gadol a carbon ashutfim? Because the Torah says that power is machaper for echav hakohen. So the achim of the kohenim are considered ilim, and to some extent owners of this carbon. They own the kapara. The kapara is relevant to them. But if you recall yesterday, the Gemara had two definitions of how this operates. How does the par shel Kohen Gadol generate a kapara for the other Kohanim? Is it because they are part of the kvius, the essence of the carbon, meaning the par is coming to be mechaper for both the Kohen Gadol and for the Kohanim, or no? Fundamentally, the kapara is that of the Kohen Gadol alone. There's a spillover, so to speak. We called it a greira, in which we drag, or can we call it agav, the kapara of the Kohen Gadol, we extend it to include the other Kohanim as well. And that's a kind of secondary kapara, but really fundamentally the carbon belongs to the Kohen Gadol. So now the Gemara asks the following. With regard to Rabbi Lazar's suffix, in which Rabbi Lazar vacillates about whether the nature of the kaparas hakohanim in the partial Kohen Gadol is a kvius gemura, it's an absolute essential part of the carbon, and every single Kohen is called a bailim over the carbon. Or do we say, no, it's not a chatas hashutfim, but rather this is the carbon and the kapara of the Kohen Gadol alone. And agav, as we said before, beknufya, by and by, indirectly, it spills over, and the kapara is relevant to the other Kohen. But the other Kohanim really have no bailus; they don't have any kinyan on this carbon, on this partial. So the Gemara asks typically, how could you even have such a stuff? Why don't you derive the conclusion from the pasuk, the asher lo? The pasuk says, "V'kriva Aaron es par chatos asher lo." It's his par. Omar achmonu mishalo hu mevi. He brings the par from his own money. It's his kinyan. He has exclusive private ownership over the par. And we don't take the monies of the tzibur that were given for karbonos tzibur and siphon it off, nor, for that matter, do we take a collection from the other kohanim to purchase the par. The par is bought exclusively from the funds of the Kohen Gadol. The Sanya we learned to the Brisa, and the Brisa is darshaning the pasuk v'hikriv Aaron es par chatos asher lo, mishalo mevi, v'lo shel tzibur. Okay, so he cannot buy the par with the monies of the tzibur, the most of the tzibur that were collected for the purpose of what we call the kupas hatzibur, the trumas halishka, to buy karbonos tzibur. No. But yachol lo yavi v'shel tzibur she'ein hatzibur miskapen bo aval yavi Shal echav hakonim sharei echav hakonim is kaprimbo. Okay, fine. You had one pasuk that said Asher lo. From that pasuk we exclude the woman and the tzibur. But maybe the other kohanim are shutfim and they could chip in to buy this carbon. You need another pasuk, says the Brisa, in order to exclude the possibility of collecting funds from the other kohanim, because they have a kapara in this carbon. Talmud Lama, what's the second pasuk? So in addition to the first pasuk, which is pasuk vav in Perek Tezai, now we're fast forwarding to pasuk Yud Aleph. It says v'kriv arones parachatos asher lo. Once again, the Torah emphasizes asher lo, and that's coming to exclude michal echav hakonim, that we cannot contribute and collect monies from the other kohanim. This, despite the fact that they have a kapara, the money has to come mishalo and exclusively from that money of the Kohen Gadol. I always wondered what happens if the Kohen Gadol is poor. We'll have to take up a collection, but the money has to come from his bank account. Yochel, I might think, okay, fine. Lo yavi, we should not lechatchila, if all things are equal, we should not collect the monies from the Kohanim to purchase the par. But b'di'eved, im hevi, if the monies for the purchase of the par came from the pocketbooks, the bank accounts of the Kohanim, is kosher. It's not critical. I mean, it's a nice thing. Ideally, let's take the money exclusively from the bank account to the Kohen Gadol, but if not, it could be kosher. And for this, we need a third pasuk that requires shalom. Talmud Lomar Shuv, a third round, and it says v'shachad es parachatos asher lo is shana kosev olav liakev. We have a principle in Kodshim that whenever the Torah repeats itself, the second the repetition is for the purpose of teaching that this requirement is absolutely critical. It's indispensable. It's ma'akev. And again, you might have asked, so why does the Torah have to say mishalo, ashalo 3 times? Why not twice? But the answer is I need the second time to exclude the monies of the Kohen. But I don't know if that's l'chatchila or even the Eved Likuva. So for that, I need a third pasuk. Now, since the Kohen Gadol has to, the bottom line, the Kohen Gadol has to bring the par from his money exclusively. Therefore, for sure, he's the one who's kovea and is kavua essential to the actual kapara, the kapara power that's inherent in this carbon partial Kohen Gadol is his. It's exclusively that of the Kohen Gadol. And the fact that the other Kohanim can achieve kapara through the par, that's agav. That's bekufia. That's something that's drag begrera, but it's not that it's his carbon. And therefore it's crystal clear now that there is tmura, valid tmura from the partial Kohen Gadol, because it's the Kohen Gadol's personal carbon, and a carbon yachid also tmura. So why did Rabbi Lezer vacillate about this? So the Gemara says, wait a minute. Litamech, I have a question on your logic. You're raising the issue that you want to prove the kaparas hakonim is not kavua. It's not part of the essence of the carbon. It's just a byproduct of the carbon, and that's why you want to call it a carbon yachid, and it's oset tmura. But wait a second. We have a principle that if you don't purchase a carbon, then it's not mechaper. You're not one of the miskaper. To be a miskaper and to achieve kapar through a carbon, you have to be a bailim. You have to own and participate in the purchase of that carbon. Now you're telling me that the carbon is purchased exclusively from the money of the Kohen Gadol, and therefore it's a carbon yachid, it's also tmura. How then is it possible for the Achiv HaKohanim to achieve kapara through a carbon that's not theirs? They're not the bailim, they're not the miskaper. Hello. Now I forced you into a corner. You're going to have to concede that Shiny Beit Gaza di Aaron. Now the phrase Beit Gaza is called in Hebrew, it's called the base oter. We would call it the bank account. The bank account, the assets of the Kohen, represented here by Aaron, are afkari rachmana l'gabe yechav haKohen. The Torah says that the bank account of the Kohen Gadol, of Aaron, is hefker. That's called the afkari rachmana. Again, it's not hefker for you and I; it's hefker for other Kohen. And if that be the case, now I can justify, and there's no other way out, how the Kohanim could get a kapara through the paro shel Kohen, because the monies that Aaron HaKohen uses to purchase this par belong not only to Aaron, but also to the Kohanim. Is if that be the case, once you admit that the monies belong to the Kohanim, and that's the only way you could justify that they get a kapara for this par, is hacha gabi tmura nami. Let's apply the exact same logic gabi tmura to set it up as what we call a korban of shutfim. There are many partners. It's not exclusively the bailus of the Kohen Gadol. And Bei Gaza, Shani Bei Gaza, the Aaron, the afkir rachmana l'gabe echav haKohen. So the moment of Aaron, meaning the Kohen Gadol, when he brings this par, the Torah was mafkir that moment, Esel, with regard to Shar Kohanim, so they can be zoka now through that money in the par, and now their kapar is kavuabo. And that's why it becomes, according to one side, in Rabbi Elazar's Safek, a korban of shutfim, and therefore, eno oset mur.